Welcome back to the Table Rush Talk Show. I'm your host, Mischa Zvegintzov. Today I'm diving into a fascinating conversation with Divya Ramachandran, an executive leadership coach with a deep background in tech startups. Divya helps leaders navigate the chaos and confusion that often come with startups, especially when it comes to tackling tough conversations and finding clarity. We explore how solopreneurs can break through overwhelm, improve communication, and focus on what truly matters. Get ready for some powerful insights into how you can lead with less stress and more purpose. Divya, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me here, Mischa.
Indeed, I'm super excited to have you here. Let's see, where do I want to go with this? Let's start with, you seem young, very young, so I'm excited to get a younger person's perspective of startup culture, about how you've gotten to where you are. You have a PhD from Berkeley. And what's your PhD in?
In computer science.
Computer science. Yeah. So you have a good, rich history already at what seems to be a relatively young age to me. I'm 55 as of this recording, so I'm very excited to get your perspective on things. But also, you might, I don't know if this is appropriate question right off the gate. Maybe you just look younger than you are.
Thank you for calling me young. I'm not that much younger than you, but yes, but I do have some experience that I'd love to share with you.
Okay, well, perfect. Let's start quickly with, in 3 minutes or less, what do you do?
Yeah, so I help leaders do hard things, and I work with leaders and teams. I have primarily worked myself at tech startups, and so that's primarily the leaders that I work with. And so when I talk about doing hard things, it's really about helping them find clarity to really chip away at some of the more complex or ambiguous tasks or ideas, dreams, visions that they may have, and make progress on them slowly over time and really create an impact. And a big part of what I'm doing with the leaders and teams that I'm working with is helping them help other people do hard things. So how are you bringing people along? How are you influencing, whether that's your team that reports to you or your managers that you're reporting up to, or working across the aisle with your peers? So really having some of those hard conversations in a way that feels less stressful and fosters trust and alignment and connection. And overall, just kind of moving towards a place of fulfillment rather than everyday stress.
Yeah, give me some literal examples of hard things. Like, give me some specific examples.
Yeah, for sure. I would say the hard conversations are always like the top hard thing, right? Most people the stress that you experience at work is almost always because of an individual, like one other person that you're just having a hard time having conversations with or convincing in some way, or they have a lot of, they're dissatisfied or disappointed. So a lot of the things are having hard conversations about, like giving feedback or dealing with conflict with a peer or advocating for yourself or your ideas to a boss or to the other people at your company, that kind of thing. You look like you were.
No.
Okay, I think you're going.
I was going to have a comment on that, but keep going. I'm appreciating what you're saying.
Yeah. Some of the other hard things are about just getting things done. So how do you get things done and focus on the things that matter when there's just so much going on? So especially when I'm working in startups, but honestly, I think work in general, maybe life in general these days is just so much chaos and confusion that it's really trying to identify what really matters. And do that in a way where, the people that I'm working with are ones who find themselves stuck in this place of I'm doing, and trying to get a bunch of things done. And there's this questions, that nagging question inside of like, why am I doing this? Or what actually matters? What's important to me? So I'm really trying to work with leaders who have already kind of had that recognition and are willing to do the hard work of let me reflect on what it is that I am doing. What are the patterns or beliefs that I'm holding? And how are some of those serving me and helping me achieve success, but which ones are actually standing in my way and of feeling joy or feeling fulfillment in life.
I like that. So if I heard you correctly, we've got two sorts of people: those who are frustrated, they have poor communication skills or uh, or situationally poor communication skills. Typically, leaders in the startup community is who you're working with mostly, and then they also have a focus problem, or they're bogged down in minutia, or that 80% of the tasks that are just grinding, right?
Yeah.
But they might be in denial about that. So they might be at a space of, well, if these other people would just listen to me better or do what I want or things like that, or they're, I don't know, fixated on the fact of the minutia and think that solving the minutia is going to be the problem. So that's not the person yet that you want to talk to. You want to talk to the person that's like, all right, my communication skills are perhaps lacking. I could be more efficient. I could be a better leader. I could improve all these things if I just learned how to communicate better, or have those hard conversations, or stick up for myself, or maybe, I suppose, some people it's advocate for themselves. Other people, it's going to like allow other people to advocate.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
But they're an acceptance of that. So they're ready. It sounds like what you're saying. They're like, all right, I see I've got some issues I need to change in my communication style, but then also, like, I'm buried in my work, and and being more efficient in this buried space is not helping me. I need to do something different.
Yeah.
Am I
Yeah.
hearing you right?
Totally. And I think that readiness, I wouldn't think of it as kind of you're either ready or you're not, right? There's a gradient here. And I think even the two categories you talked about is like, yes, both of those. And sometimes you're just a jumble of both, right? In some situations, you're totally ready and you're like, oh, I feel like in this relationship, there's something I can really change to be more effective. Whereas there's this other one where you're just like, it's all their fault. This is not me at all. It's them. And so you kind of feel more closed around how am I contributing to this? And so it's interesting because as we start working together, maybe we're working on this one situation where they're feeling ready and light bulbs are going on around, oh, how could I apply this in these other places where I haven't felt ready? So you're kind of creating that readiness and you're pulling them along that gradient of not so ready to more ready.
Yeah. I like that. I like that. There's some acceptance perhaps if I need to change, and you can help shed light on where they need to change. So there's even just an awareness that they don't even necessarily need to know specifics. They just have to have that awareness of like, all right, I'm ready for some change, some growth, some um trying not to put positive, negative on any of this, right? Because I was talking to a friend today, and I'm in a space with my business where I feel like, you know, two analogies. One, I've got the golf ball going through the or through the water hose, right? It's just like that
Yeah.
stuckness, that like, oh my gosh, I'm swimming in mud
Yeah.
kind of a feeling.
Yeah.
Uh, or the anaconda that's eaten the pig, and there's this big lump, right? Going through. I don't know. So I appreciate sometimes, you have that awareness. It's all right. How do I press through that, or find the resources to help me delegate or do all these things? Thank you for listening to that tangent. But does that spark anything in you?
Absolutely. I mean, I think just you right off the bat, you found that word awareness, and that's really what all of the work is about. I think most coaches that I know, at least, our goal is really like the whole role of a coach is to help people build awareness. And it's really about like, how are you building awareness around a number of things? One is my own thoughts and beliefs that are standing in my way. How am I building awareness around the emotions and that I'm feeling, and developing a healthy relationship with those emotions, but also building more awareness around the people around you and like what might be going on with them. So understanding other perspectives, building that empathy, just what does this look like from their shoes, and potentially wanting to, or recognizing the need through that awareness to get curious about the other people. So noticing like, hey, I'm just assuming these things about you, but maybe I can get curious to understand what's actually going on with you. So all of the work is really about building that awareness. And so I think even just the fact that you're calling out that you're in that place, right? And so am I. So am I,
Yeah.
right? Like there's just like this stuckness. But for us to be able to kind of step outside of that and say, I'm stuck, but there is a way out. I can look for resources. There's things that I can do. It's okay for me to feel stuck right now because this is my winter, but spring is coming. Right. And so I have to go through this, but something good is coming from this. And so that itself can help us move out of that stuckness and, um, push ourselves through it.
I love that perspective and the idea of loving the stuckness, right? I literally was going through that this morning. I was like, I'm stuck and I love that. I love that I'm stuck. I love that I'm frustrated with the thoughts that I'm stuck,
Yeah.
right? Like trying to love those thoughts instead of beating ourselves up for those thoughts. There's a great guy, Kyle Cease, who talks about that. He's like, love your thoughts. I love the thought that I'm frustrated that I'm frustrated. It's like
Yeah.
it can be a lot of fun. But I did today that was really cool. And this is more about you, but you can speak to what I did and give me your thoughts on it. I'm reading this book, 10x is easier. Is 10x is easier than 2x right now?
I just finished reading that book like 2 weeks ago. So big fan.
Yeah, so fun, right? And I try to. It's best when, you do what they say to do, whoever the author is, right? Because a lot of times we'll just read books and go, oh, that was great information. But when we come to that, hey, here's almost an exercise, right? So it's Ben Hardy, right? That's the author, I think, Ben Hardy and Dan Sullivan. Yeah.
Mhm.
So it was, in effect, inventory the 80% of what you're doing that you're mired in right now. And so I did that exercise this morning, and it was surprisingly freeing. It helped me look at where I'm stuck, right? And what am I trying? It freed me. It wasn't like, oh, well, I'm going to get all that done or I have the solution for it, but it was like, oh, there it is, and that's okay, and you can park it over there for the moment, and the who will materialize that I can offload that to. Perhaps does that resonate, or maybe you could speak to that, or
Yeah, completely. Sometimes it can feel, I haven't done the exercise yet, but now I'm feeling more and more inspired to do that. But it can feel like up until we do this work or that kind of work, it feels really overwhelming. It's just like, oh my gosh, how am I going to write all of that stuff? And then I'm going to have this list of all these things and then I have to do something. But just getting it out into a concrete form outside of you, like, so it's not here, you're not carrying it on you, it's outside of you. That is such a relief in itself. And I think that's true with all kinds of thoughts, because not only are you carrying all those tasks, right? We're carrying all the thoughts about like, I have to get this done, or I have to figure out somebody else is doing it, or if I'm going to give this work to somebody else, I have to teach them. And, it's just like there's this ongoing narrative that we're just carrying around it. And that's heavy and it's hard and it's distracting. And it's those thoughts are what are really leading to our stress in the first place. And so even just like it's creating distance, right, between yourself and those thoughts. And by putting it on paper itself, it's like, oh, okay, I can do this.
yeah, absolutely. It was very freeing. And yeah, I can do this. And actually, here's the template of who I need to find, right? Because before, until I really penciled it out and it actually it took a lot less to do the inventory time than I thought it was going to, right?
Yeah.
Like when I really just was like, all right, just take the pain and do it. It's usually what it is, right? We can spend 4 weeks worrying about it and then a half an hour of writing it out. But I was like, oh my gosh, there's the job description,
Mm.
right? Where before it was like very all these disparate thoughts and ideas. And it's like, there's no way, like you were saying, right? Like there's no way I can show someone how to do all these things. And it was like, oh, actually, really, it's just, these buckets right here. And I've been very tactically trying to create SOPs along the way too, standard operating procedures. But anyway, um, yeah, go
I,
ahead.
that unlocked so much for you. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for listening. This is like therapy for me right now.
This is great for me. It's so inspiring. I'm feeling very motivated to do this tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Well, quick, since you just got that book done, The Gap in the Game. No, not The Gap in the Game, which is another great book. 10x is easier than 2x. You want to speak to that, or what jumped out at you in that book, or what what inspired you in that book, or anything you want to riff on for a minute in that
Yeah,
book?
yeah, sure. I mean, so this book has been, highly recommended in a cohort of at a business development course that I'm taking, and everyone was talking about it, and I'm also really curious about it. And I think a couple of things that really tie to the work that I do as well. That it's a new frame of all of that. Just this idea of 2x to 10x. I mean, the main premise that I'm taking away is if your goal is simply to kind of double your impact or your outcomes or whatever it is, your output, essentially the only thing you can really think about is doubling your inputs to achieve that. Because you're like, okay, well, if I just do, if I just do twice as much as I am doing, I can figure it out. And so when we think that way, we get bogged down with this idea of time. Like, do I have enough time to do that? Okay, I need to okay, if I could just free up, you know, I can do this for 2 hours. If I'm doing this now for 2 hours a day, I just need to do it for 4 hours a day. So I need to find the thing that I don't do for, it just becomes very tactical about like, how do I get enough time? And oh no, if at some point we get blocked by, but there's only 24 hours of the day and I only work for 8 hours and I've got to go, take care of my kids, whatever else, all the other stuff. But when we just put that aside and stop thinking about like, how am I just going to double my inputs? But we think 10x. So we're just like coming up with this almost impossible ideal of a dream that's actually driving us. All of a sudden, it just puts things in perspective around all these. We're not thinking about just how do we get it done. We're not just trying to solve a problem. We're trying to think of like, what's the optimal solution to make this happen? Right. And so it's completely different because now you're unlocking and you're thinking about all types of different options. You're thinking more long term in terms of, do I need to be the one doing this, or can I invest the money here now so that I can create that kind of 10x outcome? So it's it's a totally different mindset shift. And the framework that I tend to use with my clients, it's similar in this way, is around energy, where we talk about our energetic, physiologically in our body, when we're experiencing or believing that we are dealing with the stress in our environment, we are releasing hormones like adrenaline and cortisol, which essentially make us focus all of our resources on that thing that's stressing us out to just make it happen. So it's just about like this problem solving, like, okay, there's this deadline coming, or there's this conflict I have to deal with, or there's this milestone, something, and you're focusing all of your resources on there. And that's fine in short bursts, but it's intense because that's all you're thinking about. Your entire body's focused there. But if we don't see ourselves as like, we have to do this one thing, or we have to address the stressor in our life, if we're thinking more openly about like, there's no stress, then what do I need to do? Then we release anabolic hormones, which allow us to think about the bigger picture. What is the best possible solution moving forward? And so it just changes us from this like closed fight or flight. I'm always stressed and need to get everything done, to this open, what are all my solutions? What are the different possibilities? What's the best option for me moving forward? And so, yeah, it's just coming back to your question around that 2x, 10x. It's just another really nice reframe around like, how can I open up the way I'm thinking to be thinking bigger picture and more sustainable long term?
I love that. And I think you shine a great light on the fact that if we are in that open space and the bigger picture, sometimes the minutia falling through the cracks is okay, because it's like, well, in the bigger picture, I am taking the right steps to get to that bigger thing, or that bigger picture, that bigger goal, that bigger vision. So it's okay that these like small things that I'm hyper fixated on, that are triggering that fight or flight, like those three people that I have to respond to. It's like, well, no, maybe you don't. In my arena, I'm like, whatever test I did into the market that created those engagements, that's the important thing.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, perhaps those people fall through the cracks, but I'm working on how do I scale that hook and then how do I scale the reply, right? So that way it's not really so important about replying to one-offs. I'm not saying ignore that or be rude or whatever, but does that make sense? Am I making sense when I'm talking about that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It just puts things in perspective. And like I was saying earlier, all of the people I'm working with and me half the
Yeah.
time, when we feel stuck in this doing, there's like this question, like, wait, why? Am I doing what matters? Right. And it's almost like there needs to be a parallel track. You're doing all this stuff, but what are you doing to also find clarity along the way? And clarity is not a state, it's a process. So what is the additional thing that you're doing to check in, make sure you're clear on what matters most? Am I doing the things that matter? Am I doing it in a way that's most optimal or sustainable for me? And like that's this parallel track of life that we need to be nurturing and fostering at the same time we're, busy climbing up the corporate ladder or doing all the other things that get us all the accolades and achievements that we're kind of almost trained to achieve.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to speak to your framework, or it sounds like you have a process that you run your clients through. But before we get to that, um, you are in the tech startup space. Man, there's so many great directions we can go. Like how does one end up in the tech startup space doing this coaching, and how fun is that? And we can get to that in a little bit. But tech startups, so are we talking typically 1 to 5 person operation that's trying to get their idea to market, or are you mostly 50 to 100 in that small tech startup, 50 to 100 people, or any? I'm not trying to put you in a box, but I'm just curious who you're usually resonating with or helping most, or is that a reasonable
Yeah.
question? Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So I do primarily work with leaders at startups, but startups, like you said, there's everyone defines it differently. I have a couple of teams that are maybe 20 to 30 that I work with, or leaders at teams that are that actually have some that are even smaller. Um, and then some are, a couple hundred. And so it's sort of, it ranges. And the problems that you see, of course, at all of these different states are all the stages in general from a business perspective are very different. Um, but I think one thing's very common, which is that there is often, there is a lot of change and there is constant change. And being able to adjust to that and bring people along for that change or go along on that change, that's maybe the most that's the common thread that's tying all of these together.
Cool. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Um, you're I think first let's dive into how do you get to being would you say a leadership coach? Yeah,
Yeah.
how does one go from Berkeley, uh, getting your PhD? Before we jumped on here, you said you got your undergrad from Utah. What was it? Not Utah State, University of
University.
Utah. Yeah, University of Utah. You go to UC Berkeley to get a PhD. Is there education in between that? Eh,
No, there isn't.
What's that?
No, it was a direct. Yeah, I could tell
Okay.
you a story, which sometimes you look at these things and it seems so. It's like, how does this even make sense? But somehow it started to make sense in my mind. In hindsight, only of course, going around when you're going through it, it just feels like one shift after another. So my background, like you said, I got my undergrad degree in computer engineering at the University of Utah. It was I think I was primarily driven just by the people that I was surrounded by and the values that were instilled in me in the community that I was in. I'm a daughter of immigrants, and it's just sort of there's certain lessons that many of us here are. One of them is really about making the most of every opportunity and also getting a job that's secure and um, you know all that. So I don't remember really thinking, hey, am I passionate about this? I don't remember really knowing if I really cared much about computers, but I know that I went to college and I took the classes that were interesting to me and I did well. And that's just sort of how I was raised and how I had been for those years and during those years. And my dad actually immigrated to this country from India in the 70s, and he came here to do his postdoctoral research. So he had he has still, but a very strong kind of inclination towards academic research, although he didn't end up working in academia, but it was something he wished for his daughters. I have one sister. And so I think this dream of getting a PhD was just something that, maybe he whispered to me at night when I was sleeping or something, but it was just something that was in me for a long time. And so for my entire childhood and through college, my North Star was I want to get a PhD. And at some point I landed at UC Berkeley as my dream school. So it was interesting because when I finally got to Berkeley, I was so excited. It was just like, that was the dream. That was the goal. I had never thought about what I wanted to do after that. Really, I had. And so I showed up to do my PhD in computer science. And in those first few months, it was so hard. I was just like, what am I doing here? Everyone around me was so smart, serious imposter syndrome. Not that I knew to call it that at the time, but I think what really struck me was everyone around me really, really cares about solving a problem, and they're really deeply motivated by it. And they've done things like this before. And I was searching so hard to find a problem that really drove me. And I couldn't find one for a long time. And it took until maybe the end of that first year where I found a team that was working on, it was a field of human computer interaction. So it was really about how are we designing products and designing and using computer technology to address human problems. So I knew I wasn't motivated by computer problems, but I realized I was very motivated to solve human problems. And so they were actually working, the first team I ended up working with, it was working on developing technology for developing like underdeveloped regions in the world. And so it was really about how are we bringing it to the most rural populations. And this was kind of before cell phones were in everyone's hands. It was, it was like just before that big shift.
What years are we talking about? What years?
Early 2000s.
Early 2000s. Okay.
By that time. Yeah. And so, yeah.
Well, I'll say too, I'm asking you this because I perhaps accused you of being younger than you were, right? Sorry. But I'm like, all right, let's quick do the calculation. How old are we actually talking here? What's that?
Have you done the math?
Yeah, now I got to do quick. So I'm assuming you went high school, college, PhD, or undergrad, whatever, and there was no breaks in between.
Okay.
Any graduating early or anything? Were you like
none of that?
None of that. Okay. So let's see. Let's say 40-ish.
Yes, 40-ish is a good guess. Yes, that's right. I'm in my early 40s now. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Good. My calculator's still kind of working. Anyway, so you I think when I was in sales, and I was a home loan officer for many years in finance and even some tech sales, but had a finance degree, there was always, you spoke to this imposter syndrome, right? Where it's like, am I really bringing value? Are people going to see through me, or whatever these thoughts that we have? And I know that when I was younger selling, I was like, am I too young, or whatever, or people aren't going to value my experience or things like that. So I don't want to shortchange you and your experience, projecting my own imposter syndrome onto you.
I really appreciate that. Appreciate that you're calling that out. It is, I think there's a really wonderful foundation principle in my coach training program. So it's called IPEC, where the energy leadership framework that I was talking about came from there as well. And one of the kind of foundation principles that we were taught was that each person you meet is your teacher and your student. And I think it's a really helpful frame in that context, right? It's just like at some point, age is just doesn't matter. We all have life experience. We all have our struggles. We all have our growth path, and it happens at different ages for everybody. And that's just, yeah.
Too. And youth, somebody in their 20s or 30s, sometimes that ignorance can actually serve, not saying that, but I'm just saying that myopic viewpoint can help you stay on that focused course versus I overthink things now because I've got wisdom or whatever, right? It could just be like, let's go, you know?
Exactly. I mean, I'm a strong believer that around this idea that things happen for a purpose. And I think that, and so when you think about it that way, it's just like, whatever is the experience you need to have in that moment, that's what you're going to,
Yeah.
that's what happens, and you learn from it and you grow from it. And I mean, I'm sure there are people who are much, much younger than me that have had much more life experience in many ways. And I have so much to learn from them, and vice versa.
Yeah. So you've got husband, kids, career, PhD. Yes. Is all this stuff.
Yeah. Yes, for all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You have some life experience. It's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially if you've got throw the kids in the mix, it's like doing all that and being a mom and raising a family. My hat is off to you. So, um, uh, where was I going to go with this? I think it's interesting too, not to go down a tangent, but I think, this idea of what I see in you is really just a mirror, right? So I'm like, oh, I totally projected some imposter syndrome onto you. And so that is like, I have all those fingers pointing back at me. And it's like for me to look at right now, perhaps even after this conversation and go, huh, maybe it's not, maybe it's my age. Maybe I'm thinking of my age, I'm too old, right? Or maybe who knows? It's up to me to look at it and go, all right, like maybe where is imposter syndrome, you know, flaring in my life and what I'm doing, or my business and what I'm doing, and where can I don't want to say attack that, but maybe fearlessly lean into it, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Even,
I really appreciate that you're bringing that up. Sorry, I interrupted you.
no, go.
Yeah. No, just that idea that, um, in anytime we're feeling some discomfort, especially when we're in conversation with somebody else, um, there's always this possibility that there's something underlying for you that is creating whatever is that emotion, or that feeling of, whether it's like anxiety or intimidation or confusion or whatever it is. There's something inside that's really leading to that frustration. And uh, yeah, I appreciate that you're sort of seeing that is coming up. And here I am, like, I didn't even like, it didn't affect me, right? Like, everything that you're
Yeah,
talking about, everything, it's like, okay, that's
yeah,
it. I was younger than I am. I'm not, I'm,
yeah.
that's it. Like, we're just moving on.
No, totally. And I don't mean to keep talking about it, but it's interesting to take it to another level, right? It's in my head and not yours,
Yeah.
right? So in the background, I'm worried about a comment that I made at the beginning of the interview, you
Yeah.
know. Um, but I was also going to say, to bridge it to how you help and serve your clients, you must be seeing a ton of this where people are in that emotional, judgmental. I think oftentimes when we're judgmental of other people, places, or things,
Um,
like that's a real opportunity for us to look and go, okay, how am I, you know, bringing this to the world? Or, you know what I mean? I hope I'm saying those terms right, but
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Gosh, you brought the word judgment, and so it's like one of my favorite things to talk about, because um, I think all stress comes from judgment. Every bit of it. It's just like a perfect, correlation. Like, the more you judge, the more stress you feel. And so either you're judging yourself for something you think you did or shouldn't have done or could have done better. That's very stressful. Or you are judging other people, which is frustrating, and you're annoyed and you're feeling all of those feelings around just like resentment or entitlement, right? Because somebody else is doing this thing that they shouldn't be, and you feel like you need to fix it to make it better. So there's all that. Or you're judging a situation and you're saying this shouldn't have happened, or this is not how it was supposed to go, or I really wanted it to go this way, or, oh, wow, this is the best thing in the world. And you're, it's so happy, but whatever it is, um, that's where the stress is coming from. So every single, uh, every bit of stress you feel is because you're judging,
but
and
that,
we all do it, and we all do it all the time.
yeah, it's funny. In my youth, I thought judgment was a superpower. right? Like, oh, I'm able to discern good or bad in people, places, or things, or size you up quick, or size a circumstance up quick. And that, and then it did. But then at some point, I was like, I'm gonna have a heart attack and die if I keep judging everything, good or bad, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I need to be free of that. So anyway, uh, rabbit hole. So your dad's whispering in your ear in the middle of the night, get your PhD, get your PhD. So you're driven to a PhD. Uh, you get your PhD in computer science, and you're thinking, okay, it shines a light on you that, hey, I'm interested in the people side of things, and that comes about from
From that search. Yeah. Correct.
yeah,
Oh,
you're interested in how computers can better act with people, or however
yeah,
you said that.
exactly. So that's what introduced me to this world of design and what it means to sort of a understand people, how they do things, and how can you make their lives better with the technology. I'm gonna kind of flash forward through the PhD. All of that happened.
Yeah.
Ended up going, it ended up being a very positive experience once I found a problem I cared about. And then I decided, so I was already in the Silicon Valley. I was really curious about different startups. And so I ended up just getting a job as a designer. So user experience designer is my first job at a startup, and then did that for about 8 to 10 years. And so I was slowly moving up um, uh, as just an individual designer to eventually managing a team and then leading a product team. So I was leading product managers as well as user experience designers. And it was actually when I was doing that about 5 years ago, maybe more, at an AI startup, where I finally, when I was feeling a lot of stress, just the stress of being at a startup, all the chaos, all the need to hold a vision when maybe I wasn't so sure I believed in it as well, but needing to hold that vision for my team, but also for the whole company as the head of product. And so at that time, I worked with an executive coach. So finally getting to how coaching fits in here. I worked with an executive coach, not sure what it was going to be about, but she just really it was a group of us that were kind of working with her together, had us really look inward and think about our own leadership style, our own baggage that we were carrying into conversations, into situations, looking at that judgment, building awareness. And it really unlocked something from me. I found it to be super transformational. And some of the insights maybe that came through that process that I went through were that the job I was in was not serving me. It wasn't serving kind of the vision or the life that I had envisioned for myself. And so I left that job, and grateful that I had the ability to leave that job for a little while. My kids were pretty young. And I was exploring for a little about, some months about what would I want to do next. And I was driven by this idea that I want to be engaging with individuals in some kind of a meaningful transaction. I wanted to be doing something on my own. And I didn't know what it was going to be. And coaching was just one idea that I was exploring. And somehow during that process, that time of my life, coaches just started showing up in my life. And so I was encouraged to just sign up for a coach training program. And day one of the course, it was so clear to me that this is what I wanted to do. It just connected a lot of dots for me, and it made it was just plain and simple for me at that moment that this is exactly what I'm going to do. So I started my business alongside the training, and have been doing this work ever since. And because my network was already in tech, it sort of just naturally flowed that way, and I naturally found that I had a higher impact in that space as well. So there's the answer to a very long-winded answer to the question you asked me maybe 10 minutes ago.
No, I love it. I think it's awesome that to find what you like to do in a niche that you can thrive in, or with an avatar. People call them avatar, or the perfect customer. There's all these different ways to say it, but to be able to be like, yeah, I can serve tech startups at a high level. Um, I'm imagining you're providing, you're probably helping people sleep better. You're probably helping people ultimately have better relationships with their families, because as you de-stress them at work and help them be more productive or get focused or all these different things, that automatically ripples out to your family,
Yeah.
friends, associates. Again, assuming um, you want to change those things, right? So try not to apply judgment to it as good or bad, right? It's like what's in alignment with me, right? Because some people thrive in that. I don't know how to say it. I should let you speak to it rather than me. And you want to riff on anything I just said right there?
Yeah. I mean, I think the one thing that I think everyone can agree on is that they want less stress in their life. So even when we talk about judgment and conflict and any of these things, we're not saying any of these things are good or bad. Like it's okay to judge. It's okay to have a very strong opinion about something and believe something is absolutely wrong and stand up for it. But we just want to be doing that consciously. We don't want to be doing it by default in a way that is creating stress. So if we are choosing to write an angry email, or we are choosing to go and, stand in protest to something, absolutely, we're letting that judgment play out, and we're doing it, but we're doing it for a purpose. It's serving us. So the whole goal is to increase your awareness so that you feel at choice. And when you feel at choice, you feel less stress.
I love that. What a great way to say that. That's good. I just want to let that sink in for a second. Internalize that. I love that. It's yeah, purposefully, yeah. I don't know, maybe you could speak to that in another way. But it's like, all right, there's something in the world I'm not happy about. I'm judging that as not being good for the world or my community or family or whatever it is. Um, so how do I turn that into a positive? Yeah, and take positive action so it's relieving stress and perhaps solving the problem rather than creating stress. And that's, I like that versus ignoring it versus just going, well, world is how it works, blah blah blah, because that can be sort of the other side of the coin, being like, it's not my deal, I'm just gonna turn away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a choice too, if that's going to serve you more. Right. But if by ignoring it, it's creating more stress for you,
Yeah.
then maybe there's a choice that would create less stress.
Yeah. So you're working in I think it's, you said, a company, an AI company, you're head of product design or product was it product design?
Product and design. Yeah. Head
Product
of
and
how it's generally just
yeah, and you're either by default or by order leading the vision of the company, and you're like, yeah, I'm not sure if this is in alignment with me, so it's creating a lot of stress and this and that. I think I heard you say that. Yeah. And
absolutely.
how's that manifesting in your life? Like, what do you see? What's the pain that's coming from that?
Such a good question. I think the biggest pain for me. So my son, who's now 11, was just starting kindergarten at the time, and I, I I also had a younger one, so they were basically 5 and 3. And I think up until then, I had felt fairly comfortable with the idea that like a nanny or a grandparent was going to do just as good a job, and I was getting the time I needed, and the job was really fulfilling for me. And something clicked for me around that time where I was thinking, well, I want to walk him home from school, and I want to hear about his day. And there's like he's becoming more of a human in my eyes. Like there's just I want to be influencing and hearing and understanding about the interactions he's having. And it was just like some people have this people have this at different phases, and that was when it clicked for me. And so I think what the insight for me was that the job that I was doing was creating so much stress that it was no longer adding value. And in fact, it was detracting value because I couldn't be present physically or mentally um, in those interactions that mattered the most to me. And so it really was driven by that desire to be more in control of my life and my schedule and my plus in such a way that I could be making choices that were creating opportunities for me to be able to do the things that mattered most. And
So, oh, go. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no, that's it. Yeah.
So, existential crisis. Are you like battling dad's thoughts? You know, whatever the the culture you've been raised in of like, I need to be successful at the job and I should be having an nanny. I need to delegate that out. And are you aware that that's a battle, or does that question even make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely didn't seem obvious to me that I could just leave my job. And it didn't feel like this, yeah, sure, why not kind of thing. But I didn't know what I was going to do next, which was hard. But am grateful that I had my husband was super supportive at this time to just, take the time you need, to figure this out. So I took the time. And I think as I was taking that time, this was probably the first time in my life. And at this point, I'm in my mid-30s, right? And it was first time in my life where I was really thinking about, well, like, what do I value? Like, if I were to peel away the stuff that I've been raised with and peel away the stuff that, the startup world has taught me or what everyone else around me has been doing, what do I care about? And in fact, I had this kind of pivotal moment in my first weekend of coach training where it seemed to be just like the simple exercise, which now I do with my clients as well, where you're supposed to identify your top 5 values. And there's just this kind of streamlined process in which you figure it out. And I was struggling. And by the end of this like exercise, 10-minute exercise, and you're supposed to have 5 words. And I really, really wanted to have 5 words. And I had circled so many things. I had raised my hand and been like, could these be aspirational? Because I was aspiring to hold certain values, but I knew I was holding on to these other values that I didn't want anymore. And I went into the restroom and I cried and I cried and I cried. And I came back to the instructor during the lunch break and I was like, why is this so easy for everyone else? And he asked me, well, where else in your life are you comparing yourself to other people? Like that was his question. And then his second question was, well, he basically said, I really appreciate you doing the hard work. Like you're taking this seriously enough that you really want to find that. And I get that it's uncomfortable that you don't know the answer yet, but are you okay just sitting with that discomfort until it comes? And I was like, wow, it was super part of that. It was very, very pivotal for me. And I did sit with the discomfort for a good number of months before I felt like I could write a list. And that list keeps changing. It doesn't bother me so much that it changes anymore. But it was hard work to just see like, okay, what really matters to me? And so uh, that was, it was like a good several months of work to kind of get to a point where I said, okay, well, these are the things that matter to me. And I think I can still hold on to some of the values that, my dad or whoever else it is, like, but also peel away some of those beliefs that I've held on to myself around like what is success and what it means to be successful and how much you have to be achieving or money you have to be making or any of that.
Yeah. That's great. I love that. And put those values that perhaps our family instilled in us or community instilled in us and put it in our own terms can
Yeah.
be so valuable. Right? Like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm willing to say success is important, but let me reframe what success actually is, perhaps. Does this freak out the tech startup folks when you start talking this kind of thing, or do you not have these conversations with them?
Oh, I do. And it just depends. So when I'm working one-on-one with a client, the energy is I'm following their energy. In building trust with them is the most important thing I need to do. And the way I'm doing that, and this is not, this instant process. It's not some like manipulative process. It's actually like I'm showing up in that moment and I'm holding space for them. I'm holding I'm holding a non-judgmental space for them. And that is my role. My role is to be able to be there as the one person that they can definitely count on to just hold the space and not judge. So I might tell them, hey, this is what I'm hearing, or I'm hearing a contradiction here, something like that. But whatever they come up with and whatever ideas or answers or thoughts or insights are coming up, they're all exactly what's right for them. And I don't have the answers for them. They do. And I truly believe that. And so over time, as we build that, these ideas or these different, whatever it is that needs to unfold or whatever wisdom or insights need to unfold, they'll come up in whatever way it needs to. And so for some, we may talk mostly about energy as like this biological energy, right? And for some, they may think of energy as something that's coming and, emanating from the universe. And it doesn't matter. how they see it and what resonates. What just matters is that insights are being created for them.
I love it. Yeah, it's like some people might be going down the spiritual rabbit hole, for example, or maybe rabbit hole is not the right word, but really looking at it from a spiritual angle or from a more scientific angle or technical angle or however you want to say it. That's cool.
Exactly. And it's amazing that there is spirituality and science that explains all of this stuff. I mean, there really is. And it is all very connected. And it's amazing when you realize how it does.
Yeah, love that. So you are stressed at work, got your career going, got a couple of young children, and you're like, man, I'm gonna miss out on a lot of this life stuff that I want to experience with my kids, whether it's walking them to school, reading in class, whatever. Um, and the company brings in an executive coach, or you hunt down an executive coach, and is it a aha moment, or was it a slow build that you're like, I need to quit?
Yeah, right. I think it was a slow build. My CEO at the time just told me, "Hey, I got this email about a heads of product coaching circle, and maybe you'd be interested." So I signed up, not knowing what it was going to be at all. Um, but I was very interested in the process as soon as it started. Like I was just like leaning in, like, please let's coach me. I'll bring all my problems here. I will be as vulnerable as necessary. Because I really want to learn from this process and grow through this process. But I think it was a slow build. I'm looking back at those few months where there was just something was sinking in, and I'm not exactly sure what it was. Um, it just felt like it was time to leave eventually.
Yeah. I have had the same experience, but in the moment it felt like I did some work, some internal work, some exercises. This guy Kyle Cease, he's got just a great coach, and I did all this exercise, and I had that epiphany moment of, I need to quit this other job that I'm in and head this other direction. Looking back on it, perhaps slow build, but I definitely had I quit fighting the I need to know what to do next versus you got to take the leap and what's next will reveal itself. Um, but where was I going to go with this? So you get this coach, you leave, and you're like, oh man, this coaching, and I love this. I love the process. I can bring this to the tech community and serve leaders and things like that. Um, I know where I was going to say. Your website. I want to make sure that we are telling people where to go to find you. And so anybody watching, listening can go to DIVYALALITHA. Divya La I don't even know how to say it. Go ahead.
Divya Lalita. That's my middle name. DivyaLalita.com. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. DivyaLalitha.com. Of course, the links will be in the show notes, but DIVYALALITHA.com, and you can check out all the good stuff that Divya has. You've got a great opt-in, a hard things guide. So DivyaLalitha.com/hard things guide. That link will be in the show notes. Find clarity, do hard things is your headline there, so you can get this guide to do hard things. LinkedIn as well, you can be found on. So everybody go to Divya Ramachandran on LinkedIn. Search you. I'm guessing you're not a lot of yous there, so.
Well, I'd love to connect with your listeners on LinkedIn. So please do send me a note, connect with me there, and let me know that that you heard me on here. I'd love to talk to you about it.
Yeah, perfect. I want to talk about your process because you have an official process. I believe you called it the Energy Leadership Framework. Is that like how you like to?
Framework is what I am trained in through IPEC.
Okay.
So that's not it's not something
Okay.
I've developed, but it is something I do use with my clients.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you want me to?
Yeah, run through it really quick. Yeah, I mean, there's 5 steps, 4 steps, or yeah.
So energy leadership is more of a framework in which we are moving from this place, like I was talking earlier about catabolic energy, which is like this closed, stress focused energy, to a place of anabolic energy. And the energy leadership framework actually walks you through 7 different levels of how you get from, 100% catabolic, which is full of self judgment, to a place where, the other end of the spectrum is where you just feel kind of no judgment, zero judgment, and just love and joy and peace at all times. And so the idea with this framework, and there's actually an assessment that I do with my clients when we first start, where you can actually get a sense of, it's kind of like a personality assessment, but this is an energy assessment, which helps you kind of a point in time measure to say, how do these 7 levels live in you? And so as you get familiar with this framework, we basically start thinking about these 7 levels as glasses that you can wear. And so in any situation, we're saying, okay, well, what level do you think you're looking at this situation in now? And what would it look like if you were wearing a different pair of glasses? And so that is a lot of the work that I do. That's one of many frameworks that I use, but that is one that I fundamentally use with every client when we start. And then we continue to use that as we go.
I love that. So it's like, hey, we've got 7 levels here. 7 is ultimate acceptance, inspiration, connection, whatever, however you want to say it. And so it's like, hey, you're looking at this situation. Perhaps you're stuck in the mire. You got your level 2 glasses on.
Exactly.
Like let's relook at that from your 7 glasses, which is interesting because that could take something that you feel like is a waste of time and actually shed light on, no, this is for the greater good. Like this is necessary. Yeah.
Totally, totally. I mean, every single situation you can find, every problem you can find an opportunity, every conflict you can find a way to connect. And you just have to want to do that. And it's not like it's not like you're just swapping them out that
Yeah.
quickly. It's a process of shedding whatever's holding you at a particular level and slowly, step by step, moving yourself up.
Cool. All right. So this free copy, How to Do Hard Things, I'm looking at it. This simple guide includes 5 reflections that will shift your relationship with time and inspire you to get hard things done. In 30 seconds less or a minute or less, what's somebody going to find when they download that and they attack it?
Yeah, so I love to share stories in my writing. And so there you're going to see just 5 kind of personal anecdotes that help you see how when we shift our thinking from this finite resource, which is time. So, time always is going to run out, where you realize that it's not really about time. It's not about not having time to do something. It's about if you put the work into finding clarity on what it is you need to do, you'll always make time to do that. And so it's just 5 different ways to think about, or 5 different stories to help you kind of let that message sink in.
Awesome. Sounds like a lot of fun.
Mhm.
Any favorite before and after stories of clients that you've worked with, some transformations you've helped be a part of, facilitate? What are outcomes that you've helped people achieve?
Yeah.
Any good stories there? Yeah.
Ooh, I mean, would love to share some. So let's see. Maybe we can talk about this one client who I've had a couple of clients who have come in saying that they're quite introverted. Like, just that was a belief, a label that they've had for themselves. And so as a result of that, we're very happy to not be participating in strategic meetings, especially. So like like I don't say much, and they feel like that maybe they need to, or maybe other people have told them, hey, you should speak up more, you've got great ideas, but they're not. So that kind of theme is something that I can think of at least 2 clients that I've worked with. And so the transformation I've seen with them was really just kind of as we started digging in to see, like, okay, so why are you so quiet in these meetings? What's going on? And a lot of the time, uh, there was some judgments that they were holding around, if you're going to say something that matters, say something of value, say something that's really adding to the conversation. So there's just a high bar that they're holding around what a contribution needs to be. And they're holding other people to that bar too. So they're silently judging, right? Like, oh, that was a really dumb comment that they just made, or that person just likes to hear their voice, right? So, but they started recognizing that judgment was happening, and that judgment was actually totally backfiring on them, right? Because that's what's stopping them from speaking up. And instead of being seen as like the strategic leader or like a visionary, anything that they actually were, they were holding themselves back and just being like the person who just did the background work. Um, the kinds of changes and transformations over the years since I've been working with them, but almost even within 6 months, were just as they started dropping that judgment, as they started understanding and seeing kind of less judgment towards other people, which opened it up for them to be able to share and talk about ideas. Um, one of the leaders I've worked with is literally just set the entire vision for the company. Is really just like the most, maybe the MVP of the company now, just in terms of just being very visionary, finding a lot of ideas, but also bringing people along on that journey and really just shifting the whole way in which the company is operating. In fact, that's true with this other leader as well. Just really taking ownership over the strategy, and finding a way to influence others by having just kind of come out of that shell. And it's not really about, okay, no, I'm extroverted. No, they may still be introverted. They may need to still spend time alone to energize or refuel. But just finding a lot more confidence to be able to bring their ideas.
I love that. I think too, it probably changed their whole experience at those meetings too, from one of dread going to, and like, got nothing to share and I don't like anything anybody says, to now it's a thriving opportunity and fun and creative for them, and a whole energetic shift. And work could perhaps go from being painful to enjoyable, like fairly quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Completely changes, less stress, right? You're feeling less stress.
So I'm imagining someone who's coming to you or someone listening to this. I mean, someone goes, "This is too hooey fooey," or my words, not yours. I'm thinking why people would reject the opportunity to level up through some executive coaching like you offer, right? So I'm thinking one is just complete denial about their circumstances, or maybe a fear of looking at themselves because there's going to be a lot of growth and self-work, or what's sort of a tension point there. Does that question make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and there's so many possible things that might hold someone back from actually taking that step. Um, and I think that readiness will come. So first of all, you want to find a coach that you really resonate with, whose message or ideas you resonate with. And there are all kinds of coaches out there, and there will be a framework or a person or an energy that you really gel with. And so that will happen if you've already decided you want the help. If you're not sure, then there's always the opportunity to, start out by just reading some stuff or getting on, most coaches, including myself, we all have newsletters that we send out. You can just kind of get a sense for like, what is it that we're talking about? How does this apply? I in fact just wrote about this, I think last week in my newsletter around, it's kind of like a radio, you, you've got to be tuned to the right station to hear the message. And if you're not tuned to that station, that's okay. But you might want to fiddle around with it and see if you can find either a station that does, match. And like we talked about, there's scientific ways to approach this, there's spiritual ways to approach this, and everything in between. And there's probably something that will connect. I think everyone can benefit from just having somebody to talk to that's going to listen to them non-judgmentally and help them reflect back what they're hearing, to help them celebrate their success. You don't see any athletes out there that don't work with a coach, no matter how good they are. And it's the same idea.
Yeah. I think too, sometimes people might worry about the money aspect of it.
Oh, of course. Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, absolutely. You want to find somebody that fits within your abilities. And it's also an investment. I mean, it's an investment, not a kind of a cost. It's you're investing in something that's actually going to really pay off in different ways, whether it's time or less stress or growth in your company. But you want to find somebody that, it's a totally understandable thing that it is. For many, it may be a luxury.
Yeah. I feel like we're just getting rolling here, Divya, and I have all these other questions to ask you. But I like to be cognizant of everybody's time. I mean, there's AI. Gosh, you were at an AI startup, so it'd be super fun to dive in on AI and maybe how you use AI, but maybe give me 30 seconds on what comes to mind when I say AI or what that means to you right now.
Well, gosh, I worked at a company 6 years ago where AI was very different. It was very different at the time. Um, I think 30 seconds. I mean, how am I using AI? Like right now, just kind of fiddling around with ChatGPT and trying to see how it can help me, but not really relying on it quite yet. I'm definitely curious to hear how AI can help me with all the scheduling jumble that's going on in my head all day long. Um, but I think it's kind of just an interesting thing to think about as a coach because I just, everything for me is about how are we connecting to people and how are people connecting with other people. And that's what matters the most to me, even if I have a tech background. And so it's really just trying to understand like, what is the role? How do we continue to nurture that, the human connection, even in the presence of AI? And how do we make sure that like, we're not trying to let it all be taken over by AI? So yeah,
Yeah. It's
I think
interesting.
we'll talk more about this in another conversation.
Yeah, totally. Sorry to put you on the spot with that. I made some assumptions, right? I was like, it's like two things happen. One, yeah, I was in the AI space, and I'm sure it was very different 6 years ago. I mean, the rapid acceleration of AI, generative AI, machine learning, all this crazy stuff. I think most of us commoners are familiar with the generative AI and those sorts of tools, like Chat GPT and all of that. I also think a lot of automation processes are just getting named AI. It's like automation was already happening. Now we're just calling it AI. Um, what else could I say? But it's interesting. It's almost like you rejected it. It sounds like you're like, enough of this AI crap. Like,
Oh my gosh. Well, I think that the most important thing to recognize is that no resource, whether it's AI or money or any material wealth of any kind, is valuable unless we know what we want to do with it. And so what we want to do with it is you need to have the clarity around what am I going to do with this thing? Even with ChatGPT, if you're not asking it the right questions or prompting it in the right way, you're not going to get the right results, right? So building clarity internally is still number one. Clarity comes first. And so I think AI, there's amazing potential with AI. There's no question about it for myself, personally, for the world, from myself to the world. And it doesn't by any means mean that we don't need to also work on finding clarity for ourselves.
love it. You're like, clarity is key. Clarity is key. And if AI fits into that, fantastic. Chat GPT fits in that bucket, great. But if not, don't worry about it. Get that
Yeah.
clarity. So good. Um, I think I'd like to end here. So all of a sudden, hard stop. No, I guess which just always leads to my final question of I'll hit stop inevitably when I'm on an interview and it ends. I was like, oh, I meant to say this, or I wished I said that, or so any final thoughts, or was there anything you were hoping to say that you didn't get a touch on, or?
Gosh, I feel like we covered a lot of ground and it was just fun. It was just a fun conversation. And I don't think there's anything in particular that I'd like to add to this. I just really appreciate the time that we've shared here and the opportunity to be able to talk to you and your audience.
Fantastic, Divya. And again, we've got DivyaAletha.com, and then Divya Rama. It's such a great last name, like mine. Divya Ramachandran on LinkedIn. Are those your favorite places to be found, or are you like, find me on Instagram or Facebook, or is LinkedIn the place?
I'm not. LinkedIn's the place to find me. So
Okay,
love to see you all there.
fantastic. I'll hit stop and we'll say goodbye offline.
Right. Great. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Table Rush Talk Show. For resources to help you sell your stuff, go to belove.media belove.media/resources. That's belove.media/resources. And be sure to subscribe, comment, 5-star, and share. Thank you again for listening.